we'll be bringing your way this morning before we look at them proper. The first headlines we'll be bringing your the first story is NBA President warns Cybercrime Act is being used to silence free speech. And the UNIBEN optometry students face uncertainty over quota cuts, and stakeholders call for stronger protection for app-based drivers, and 6 African nations adopt India's digital governance platforms. These are the stories we'll be looking we'll be looking on today. Let's start with the first story we have here. The president of the Nigeria Bar Association, Alpha Mosigwe, senior advocate of Nigeria, has accused authorities of using the Cybercrimes Act to suppress free speech in Nigeria. Speaking to the Unarise television, he said the law is increasingly being deployed against journalists, activists, and citizens for expressing dissent, and rather than for genuine cybercrime offenses. Mosigwe alleged that individuals are being arrested, charged, and detained for cyberstalking and criminal defamation, even in cases that are ordinarily bailable. He further claimed that some judges and magistrates are complicit, refusing bail without legal justification, and in doing so, turning the courts into instruments of political oppression. The NBA president warned that restricting citizens' ability to criticize public officials undermines accountability and strengthens democracy. And the Cybercrime Act, first enacted in 2015 and amended in 2024, was designed to tackle online fraud and cyber terrorism. Still, critics argue that vague provisions are now being misused to stifle legitimate expression. I think what worries me here is not just about the law. I think it's how casually power is being exercised with the law. That is what worries me the most here, because when you see it's very rare for the Nigerian Bar Association to come out and start, talking about issues about some certain issues. And when you see them come out to, sound an alarm about a certain issue like this, it only tells you that something deeper has broken. Mm-hmm. And, like I said, lawyers will not, on a normal day, just come out and jump into public outrage unless that thing has become a pattern. They cannot just come and say, oh, this is an isolated, event, this is an isolated incident, and they start talking about it. It is when that thing has become a pattern and something that is even arousing some negative, thoughts and conversations around it. That is when you see lawyers jump on it. And for the Cybercrime Act, I think the Cybercrime Act, first of all, it was sold to Nigerians as a protection. That was the way it came to Nigerians, and a protection from fraudsters, a protection from, hackers, a protection from, all of those identity theft, and all kind of, crimes that cost people their lives, that cost people, their savings, and a whole lot of things. But what seems to be happening now is that the law is drifting from protection to control when you look at it very well. It almost seems like the law chooses who it's biased. It chooses who it protects, and then it leaves some people unprotected. And that kind of shifts the matter, because a democracy survives on criticism, and a democratic society that is not ready to submit to criticism is not. I don't know what type of democracy is that. I think we have to rename it. And I think it's very discomforting when we see that the law chooses who it wants to protect. And once people start second-guessing every, tweet, every post, every comment, because they are afraid that it could land them into detention, that it could, it could cost them their lives, it could cost them their property, it could cost them their safety or their freedom, then I just feel like public accountability begins to die slowly. That means people cannot, people cannot even believe in the system they should be trusting in. And what is even more unsettling is the role of the courts in this kind of issues. Courts are meant to, slow power down, to insist on rules, to not to, to insist on rules, not to speed up repression. So when I see cases like this, I don't know, it almost seems like when bail has become, should I say, a punishment rather than a legal right. So you create the fear that outlives individual case. You create fear in people, and people will not want to trust in the system. People will not want to come out, and people will stop speaking. You know, journalists will start retreating. Activists will start retreating when they see issues like this. Who will want to fight for the right of for their rights? And most times we talk about citizens should come out, know their right, fight for their rights. And we don't need to shut down newsroom. We don't need to, you know, silence people's voices for us to I don't know, to kind of push a certain narrative, or because maybe you exude some kind of power or whatnot. But let's hear what you have to say.
Yeah, well, interestingly, when I saw this news this morning, what came to my mind was the information that we got yesterday from the Controller General of the Nigerian Correctional Service, where he mentioned that a total number of 64% of those in prisons are awaiting trial. So he gave the number that out of 80,812 people, inmates in Nigerian correctional facilities, 51,955 are awaiting trial. Only 24,913 are convicted inmates, while 3,850 fall under other detention categories. So we have the larger percentage of 64% of Nigerians in prison and are still awaiting trials. So when you look at that, you see that the prison service, or the correctional service, that what we now call it, is congested. And when we look at also the judicial processes in Nigeria and also the judicial system, we see that we experience a lot of delay in that aspect as well. And there's the issue of congestion, there's the issue of also delaying of justice, which perhaps are bureaucratic processes that needs to be followed, or provisions of of the constitution that allowed them. For instance, when we had the 2023 general elections, we had to revert back to the 180 days for aggrieved parties to come on board and do that. Before it could go for months, and that was what happened in the case of Peter Obi when he was his term didn't start at the right time. It didn't start at the right time because the judicial process took a very long time before he could come in as the duly elected governor of his state. So what I think this, going back to the issue of cybercrime in Nigeria, just like you mentioned, the law was enacted and also amended to protect Nigerians from all forms of violence when it comes to social media. But what we've seen and what people feared the most when this law was being amended, or when it was being put forward by the National Assembly, was that it was going to use to push down dissent in the country, where insult becomes a crime. Where people expressing their opinions or being aggrieved about what the government is doing becomes a crime. So that is the area that we need to look at. How can we ensure that this law is not being used as a punishment from the powerful to the powerless in the country? When we talk about political leaders, when we talk about influential people, even people who are well-to-do, perhaps rich, or wealthy, we can call them, they use that as a weapon against people who criticize them or who speak against them. And for the democratic process, just like you mentioned, criticism, protest, expressing your displeasure is part of the democratic system, because it gives rooms for check and balances. It gives rooms for people being on their toes, knowing that somebody else is out there that can have the voice to question the authority or to question the decisions that they've made. So we must be able to look at that. And the Nigerian Bar Association has come out to say that we cannot actually allow this to continue. Because we're seeing that people's rights are being trampled upon and a lot of things is going wrong. So what can be done? The NBA has said their own. They do not have the power. They only have the will and constitutional right to represent people, to talk about the issues that they are facing. But the ball is still on the judicial judiciary as a third arm of the government, that they have to be the institution that upholds the people's rights to free expression in the country. So how can they ensure that people are not being sent to prison? If we have prisons or correctional facilities that are being congested, a lot of people don't even have places to stay. They're not eating well. We look at the budgets that was being presented, and we look how much was being put into the running of the facilities that we have all around the country when it comes to correctional centers, the feeding, the lights, the electricity, the paying of staffs and all of that. So if we have this place that is congested and we continue to put more people, denying them bail, and they say bail is free, but we know what it is in Nigeria, that it's not actually free. Nothing is free at the end of the day. So how can we make sure that from the judicial process, from the lawmakers themselves, because they are also a part of the government, and the executive, how can we make sure that there are policies that are being implemented to ensure that this process is actually eased away, so that people insulting, I mean, insult is not good, it's not nice, nobody likes to be insulted, but insults should not be criminalized in the country. By insulting the president or the wife, it's not something to be done, it's not something encouraged, but nobody should have to go to jail because of that, or somebody criticizing the policies of the government or talking about somebody online. There are also processes that we should do. Maybe there are some courts that we need to set up to ensure that we are able to satisfy people's grievances in that essence, in that way, or maybe outside of the court settlement that people can actually have a mutual agreement or something that can be done to ensure that we do not congest the judicial system or the prisons or the correctional service facility. That will enable people to actually exercise their rights, and also will ease the burden on the government when it comes to the budgetary allocation that is being presented into all of this area.
I think you've said it all, but then we have to move to the next story so we don't waste much time. Okay, students admitted into the Doctor of Optometry program at the University of Benin are facing uncertainty after the university moved to reduce the intake from 350 to 150, citing quota and accreditation limits. The affected students were admitted for the 2025/2026 academic session, paid acceptance fees, resumed in November, and have been attending lectures. Concerned parents say the decision, coming about 4 months into the session, leaves many students unsure of their academic future, with some reportedly denied clearance as examinations are scheduled to begin in March. They argued that the students followed due process and should not be penalized for what they described as an administrative failure by the university. The university authorities have yet to issue an official response or clarify how the retained 150 students will be selected. This situation has raised wider questions about transparency, student welfare, and regulatory compliance in university admissions. I started with I think this one, I think it's painful. I think that's why I did. I have to say, I think it's very painful, very, very painful, because I've not been in that situation personally, but I've seen people when I was in school, when I was doing my diploma, fall into similar situation, and they had to, leave school because of one fake admission or the other. This case is not a fake admission, but the school telling them that they want to admit just 150 students after giving 250 students admission. I think this one is particularly painful, because there I go again. It touches on trust. It touches on trust, because universities are not just institutions. They are, they are more like promises, especially in Nigeria where we hold education strongly. It's more like when you have education, you have a promising future, something like that. So the education, universities somehow, it's more like promises in this part of the world. And when a university admits a student, and then you collect fees, you allow lectures to begin, and then months later you are coming out to say, sorry, we made a mistake. That, we made a mistake, we cannot continue again. Where do you think that mistake will land these children? That mistake will land, we cost them their lives. We cost some of them their lives. We cost some of them their mental health. So optometry, first of all, is not a casual course. It's not just one program. It's not just one, no course is ordinary. No course is just. But optometry is not a casual program. These students didn't just stand up. I don't think I would just stand up and then go and apply for optometry. They didn't just stumble on it. Many of them likely turned down different offers. Many of them have spent years waiting to get an admission into such programs. Some of them must have gotten admissions to study other courses, and they say, no, I have to study what I want to study. And you know, some of them have written JAM countless times. Some of them relocated from different places. You know, some of them were convinced by their families. So many things. I'm trying to bring all of those investments when it comes to education into the conversation here. People have invested a whole lot of things, their energy, their time, you know, everything, even for family. So to pull the rug and from under them, you know, 4 months later, what message does this send to them? This is a very, very dangerous thing happening here, and a very painful thing. You know, students can it's just showing that students can even do everything right, read well, do everything well, follow the right processes of admission, and then at the end of the day, because of one administrative failure or the other, it will cost them their education, it will cost them their lives. So I just feel like, now, let's even be honest, quota and accreditation limits are real. But where should it begin from? That's what we should ask ourselves. Should it begin before admission processes start? Should they be coming after admission process? In short, they are already in class, they are writing exams in March, and then you are coming out to say we want 150 students instead of 350 students. Why can't you cater for these 350 first, and then the next set coming, you can think of, okay, how can we reduce the number? So I just feel like most times, like I always say, regulatory bodies exist for a reason. But governance is about timing and responsibility. And this responsibility is something we lack. If an institution exceeds its quota, the burden should not fall on the students. The burden should be on the decision-making table of the school administration, not on the students' head. Now, what do you expect these children to do at this point in time? You're clearing some students, and then you're freezing others without transparency, without nothing, without... I don't know why Nigeria always falls into this pattern of confusing people. We talk about confusion, was it the day before yesterday, how we don't... Some certain, even the tax laws, that is what is bringing this issue. People are confused because they do not understand what is there. That is how resentment grows.
I think you've spoken like a true passionate... once Nigerian
student, always a Nigerian student,
and, maybe a mother to one very soon in future. But seriously, this is another example of the deplorable state of the Nigerian education system that we've seen countless times, that the system has failed Nigerian students over and over again. Do we talk about the extensive strikes that are going on in the Nigerian universities, or the skyrocketing of school fees that most Nigerians are now dropping out? We said the federal government has provided opportunities for people to get loans and do all of that. But looking at these issues that has been raised this morning, the question begs belief to answers from different quarters of the university administration. Do we look at the administrative staffs, the recruitment unit of the university as well, and also looking at the regulatory institution? How did they miss all of this? That the students have been in school for months. According to the reports, they are due for exams. And then this news is coming out that only 150. Imagine being 300 and something in the class, and they're telling you only 150 will go, not because you failed your exams, not because you didn't do the right thing as required by the school, not because you didn't pay your school fees on time, not because you didn't position yourself at the right place at the right time, but because some people have just decided not to do their job. And that's the question we continue to raise in this country. Even if $20 billion is being invested into the education system in Nigeria, we'll still continue to have issues like this, because people that are supposed to do their job are not doing their job. When it comes to accreditation, it's a medical departments that is being recruited for new students. So how do we look at the facilities? What has been provided? How are the regulatory bodies also looking at these institutions? Because during my university days, we have visiting times when regulatory bodies will come into school to look at the facilities. What do we have? Can you actually take more students that you can take? So all of these policies all of these institutions or bodies or stakeholders need to put their heads together to ensure that these students are not penalized for things that they do not do. If the university needs to close down, maybe funding other things that are not necessary and put more funding into this department so that these students can continue. But whatever they must do, these students must not be rusticated. Their time must not be wasted, because I've seen different people bring opinion on board and say, oh, maybe they should allow them to stay for 1 year and then come back the next year to continue their accreditation. You're wasting people's time. You can't continue to do that. We must ensure that they have adequate resources and all the things necessary to foster an environment where learning is actually very conducive, where learning is encouraging their innovation and creativity. Imagine students put into this deplorable state. How do you expect them to perform when you have to think about, I've paid my school fees, I've done everything necessary, and I don't know if I'm going to be rusticated or sent away or asked to step aside for another person to come in. And now it's the time when we look at the power play. Who is more influential? Who gets to stay? Who gets to leave at the end of the day? So you can't put these children in this conundrum. I call them children, I beg your pardon, students. They're adults already. You can't put them in this conundrum. So you need to find the right solution to this problem that you've created by yourselves. These children, as students, I beg your pardon, they are not children. They are children to Nigerians, to Nigeria as well. But you can't put them in this deplorable state and ask them to be the one to bear the brunt of the consequence of your actions and inaction when it comes to doing the right thing to ensure that the education system that we get in Nigeria is actually on par with international standards. But the question remains that what is going to be done? How soon will it be done? And what are the regulatory agencies going to do to ensure that these students do not actually suffer for the inactions and the inactions of the university system? Okay,
that much say that let's go to the next story we have here, because we do not have enough time. I hope we'll just talk a little about this, but stakeholders are calling for urgent action to protect app-based drivers in Nigeria following rising cases of killings, car robberies, and violent attacks linked to ride-hailing services. They are demanding stronger safety measures, clearer legal protections, and better workforce rights for drivers operating on digital platforms. The call was made on Tuesday in Abuja at the African Restorative Justice Summit by Professor John Omole, President of the African Forum for Restorative Justice, alongside labor leaders and platform representatives. They said many drivers suffer in silence due to weak protections and unclear employment classifications, leaving them vulnerable to violence and unfair treatment and sudden deactivation. Speakers urged the adoption of a restorative justice framework that promotes dialogue, accountability, and shared responsibility among drivers, companies, and regulators. Representatives of major ride-hailing platforms, including Bolt and InDrive, say drivers' complaints would be escalated to management, as stakeholders expressed hope the discussions would shape national labor policy and improve safety in Nigeria's digital transport sector. Wale, what do you make of this story?
Well, I think this also cuts across the situation, the security situation in the country. That we're saying that there's a multiplicity and a layered security issues that Nigeria is facing, and we see that nobody is exempted, including drivers. We've seen stories of drivers being kidnapped, being actually told to also being used as a means to commit crime in the country. And we've seen that their lives is at risk, so they're making this plea to the government to ensure that their regulatory interventions that come to place to ensure that their own safety is also prioritized, while also the riders are also coming out, because we've seen many stories of riders being kidnapped or being coerced or being extorted by supposed drivers or drivers registered with all of this ride-hailing companies in Nigeria. But it goes back to the issue of the security question in the country. How can we make it better? And also with the issue of technology. When it comes to ride-hailing, we know that this is an innovative, the last 15, 20 years, I'm sure we didn't have this all around the world. But now it has become everyday go-to, safe, in quotes, and also conducive riding services that we have in the country. But how can we make sure that there are also improvements with the technology to ensure that there's a safety? If there has to be a recording device in the car, it's not a private space. It's a public space where people can actually see each other, so that other people can monitor and follow to ensure that the safety and the rights are being protected of both the drivers and the riders as well. So I think it cuts across different sectors. It cuts across different aggrieved parties to ensure that the safety of both the riders and the drivers are protected in the country. And when we look at the security issues in the country, we look at how the state governments are trying to ensure that they deploy their own resources. The federal government is saying they want to allow for state policing. We're talking about community policing. We all understand that security is a situational crisis in the country, and it's something that occurs every day. It's something that has to be looked into every single day, because once you solve a problem today, there's another one tomorrow. Exactly. But how can we ensure that resources are being allocated at all different levels to ensure that when it comes to even local government, what are the policies that have been made? Are there emergency numbers that you can call? For most Nigerian states in the country, I think it's only your state that has one of the easiest emergency contact number that you can, I think 613 or so. But for all other states, it's a whole long number that you can call for help. So imagine that you don't know actually where you can call. If it's a fire service, you need to call. If it's the police, if it's other security agencies that can actually protect your rights, you don't know who to call or how they can actually, the response time as well before they can get to where you are. If you're in a remote area, we're talking about internet connectivity for the elections as well. These are people that need internet connectivity as well, so that when they're in crisis, they can be able to make that call for safety.
Very interesting point you've made there, because just like you rightfully mentioned, today's solution can become tomorrow's problem. So I just telling drivers, first of all, that their compliance will be escalated is not enough anymore. We have to see safety features being put in place. We have to know how to identify, verify problems. When drivers have issues, we have to know how to identify them. And all of these emergency response systems should be put in place as well. And I always talk about insurance. We don't take it seriously in Nigeria. Most of us don't even know about insurance, but insurance coverage should be put in place for these drivers, because all these things should not be optional extras when we talk about the welfareism of most of these drivers. And I like the fact that they are bringing this idea of restorative justice. I think it's a very interesting thing, because it shifts the conversation from punishment alone to responsibility, because platforms make money from these drivers. Even the government makes money from, they benefit from some of this digital growth through taxes. And we as consumers too, we as passengers, we often benefit through convenience. So I think it's no longer just the driver's problem. It is everybody's problem. So let's see how we can solve this case once and for all by putting the right things in place. But that much said, let's see the last story we have here. 6 African countries have agreed to adopt India's digital public infrastructure framework as part of a new partnership. As part of new partnerships announced by the Indian government on Friday. The countries involved are Kenya, Ethiopia, Tanzania, Sierra Leone, the Gambia, and Lesotho. Under the arrangement, the countries will replicate selected Indian digital governance platforms through the India Stack Global. The systems cover digital identity, real-time payment, secure data exchange, and online public services, including healthcare, education, justice, administration, and government operations. I think that's the basis we should hear for that story. But this one, this is one of those issues that, it may sound more like, should I say, exciting and worrying at the same time. There's a juxtaposition here, because on paper, most of these Indian digital systems are very impressive, but they have helped. First of all, let me look at the positive side of it, because they have helped millions access payments. They have helped millions identify services, and they have helped millions of government platforms scale. But then, and for African countries, first of all, struggling with service delivery, that even they have also experienced that very good side of this initiative. They have benefited from it. But context matters here, because Indian digital journey came with intense debate. It came with a whole lot of talks. It came with a whole lot of policy checks. It came with a whole lot of talks about privacy, about surveillance, about data control, all other, so many ethical considerations. But those debates have disappeared to an extent, and they did not just disappear because they know what to do. It is because of consistent effort. It is because of they have put everything they need to put in place. So I'm just saying that when African countries import digital infrastructure, they should not just import. Think of it as importing technology.
Opinion at the end of the day, because by now you must, I'm sure our viewers must know that I'm not a fan of this. Our viewers must know that I'm not a fan of this signing of agreements and putting ink on paper. Because at the end of the day, what do? Do you put money where your food is, or where you want things to actually get done? When we look about partnerships with African countries in terms of technology, that's a welcome development. It's very important that we have a seamless facilities or channels or arrangements that makes everyday life easier for the people when it comes to the payment platforms, when it comes to issue of cyber security, service delivery, responsive public services and all of that, and also for ease in government institutions and interactions with their citizens. All of this welcome development for African countries. But when we look at the categories of the countries that are involved, you begin to ask the question, are they getting the right technology from... India is advanced, we cannot deny that. But are they the right partners when it comes to the funding as well? Because money has to come in. Do you have the necessary credit system or the budgetary allocations to ensure that this is actually implemented and adopted into the system? And the adoption stage as well is another problem that we need to focus in Africa, because rarely do we see things actually being completely implemented. When we look at one system, it can be adopted and everybody just use it for 2-3 months and then revert back to the system that they can profit from, where corruption has been so deep-seated in it that it becomes very juicy for them to continue to use such platforms. But also, when we look at that, we need to begin to ask questions about cyber security for Africa. We cannot continue to call ourselves sovereign nations while we're not focusing on things that are very important in terms of cyber security. Technology partners will come in, but we do not know what they're bringing in for the technology. You've been listening to your technology gadget, or even the software systems, how safe are they for your own citizens when they're using it? Because data is critical today, and that is the future for most African countries.
Okay, I think we've said a lot, but not all. We want to hear from you. We want to hear what you think. Send in your opinions, your questions, to your own ideas too, and drop it on our comment section. But then let's see the recap of the headlines we brought your way. We brought to you that NBA President wants Cybercrime Act is being used to silence free speech. UNIBEN optometry students face uncertainty over quota cut, and stakeholders call for stronger protection for app-based drivers. And then lastly, you saw that 6 African nations adopt India's digital governance platforms. Let's go on this quick break and we'll be back with the discussion segment.
Number 8, self-healing materials. Materials that repair themselves aren't just science fiction anymore. Researchers at the University of Manchester developed a self-healing aerospace material that can autonomously patch small cracks in aircraft components. In 2023, LG Chem showcased self-healing coatings that restore scratches on car surfaces within minutes under heat. The potential extends to consumer electronics, where cracked phone screens may eventually fix themselves without a trip to the repair shop. Markets and Markets estimates the self-healing materials industry could grow to over $4 billion by 2027, with applications in automotive, aerospace, and infrastructure leading the way. Number 10, advanced cybersecurity with AI and quantum resistance. Cyber threats are growing as fast as the technology protecting against them. In 2023, the U.S. saw over 3,200 reported ransomware incidents, according to the FBI's IC3 report, a 74% increase from the year before. AI-driven cybersecurity tools are now being trained to spot anomalies in real time, identifying breaches before they spread. At the same time, researchers are developing quantum-resistant encryption. The U.S. National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST, has already selected new post-quantum cryptographic algorithms, preparing for a world where quantum computers could break today's encryption in seconds. Number 11.
Okay, it's good to have you back. This is the discussion segment here on Idea TV, and you're watching Idea Morning Digest. And we're going to be talking about electric vehicles, and as a new MIT report have come out to say that electric vehicles could become cheaper than petrol cars in Africa by 2040. So Africa is grappling, we already know Africa is grappling with rising fuel costs, grappling with climate pressures and persistent energy challenges. A new global study is reshaping how we think about the future of transport on the continent. An analysis highlighted by MIT Technology Review, drawing from a peer-reviewed study published in Nature Energy, suggests that owning an electric vehicle in Africa could become cheaper than owning a petrol-powered car well before 2040. The findings challenge long-held assumptions that electric vehicles are a luxury Africa cannot yet afford. Instead, they point to a future driven by falling battery costs, off-grid solar charging, and shifting economics despite today's realities of weak infrastructure and high financing costs. And this is not about aspiration, it's about economics, it's about access and long-term transformation. Let's break down what the study says and what it means for Africa, and what still stands in the way. We'll start, and later we'll have our senior analyst join us on the show. And while talking about this, I mean, when I read this the MIT Technology Review piece, I think what struck me wasn't even the optimism there, first of all, if I should start with that. It was how quietly, practical the argument is. Because if you look at the arguments very well, because I wanted to look at it from a pragmatic point of view, but when I saw it, I said, no, this is very practical, because this isn't someone trying to sell Africa as, they're not trying to sell Africa a green dream. They are saying it's it's us having an intense look at money, at power, and at how Africans are going to survive with this new innovation. And on this continent, we very well know that transport decisions are never abstract. They are more like an economic they are household economics, if I should put it that way. They are more like an economic decision, because this is something that concerns almost everybody in Africa the most. Transport, very serious talk. And here's the part that many, not just the many analysts missed, because African consumers, first of all, are already experts at total cost of ownership. If we want to start with that, talking about total cost of ownership and versus, the purchase price. And even if they have never heard of, this phrase of cost of ownership, but it is already, that's why I say we should look at this review from the practical sense. It is already been, practiced. So when someone, for instance, when someone buys like what's the most popular driven car? Let me use in Nigeria, Toyota. The Toyota Corolla. Let me use. That's the most popular driven car. I heard it's cost effective. Like if your car breaks down on the road, you can get the parts anywhere, and for 5,000 naira, just like iOS. I didn't say that, but that's what people are saying. That's what the streets are saying. That it's cheaper. Their parts are cheaper and easy to find. So, for instance, when someone let's just say buys a used maybe Toyota Corolla in, let's say, Ibadan or maybe Lusaka. And if you look at it, while the first thing an African man, the first thing we will think of, you're not thinking of showroom price. You're not thinking of any other thing. You're thinking of how I'm going to buy fuel. You're thinking of how am I going to sustain this car in the long run? How am I going to be maintaining the parts? How about if it breaks down? Where will I get? That's why I say Toyota Corolla is the largest driven car in this part of the world, especially in Nigeria. So you're thinking of all of those things. That's what the normal African man will think of first. So when we think about, when we bring, so this is not me pushing, what do they call them, EVs away. But I'm just saying we have to think about the long run cost. We have to think about sustainability for people first of all, because these cars are brought out for people's use. We have to think about all of this thing, because first of all, we are even talking about, we understand that fuel prices are no longer cheap again. So now we are bringing EV, and now this report is trying to tell us that EVs will become cheaper than fuel. But in Africa, is it Africa that we are still battling with, a whole lot of things, electricity supply, we are battling with. We have the resources here, we know that. We have the natural resources here to put everything in place. But then, we understand that, that's why I say it's not that, let me even take Nigeria for example. It's not that in Nigeria we do not understand that, if you bring such reports, we will be happy. But we want to see how it will be replicated in reality. We want to see how it will, be actualized, how it will manifest in reality. That is what we want to see. We know that since the removal of fuel prices, fuel costs have tripled. Even in Kenya, even in Ghana, not just in Nigeria, they've been complaining about transport costs, how it is eating a huge chunk of their monthly income. But then, if charging an EV, especially at home or through solar, Nigeria are on even the better side of it, because Nigeria is a very sunny country, it's a very hot, country. So we are not thinking of all of these things. We have to cost fraction here of weekly fuel spending. If we want to compare it with charging your cars, is better. We'll opt for EV. But we are thinking of how we are going to, what scares, I think what will scare people about this, why people raise their eyebrows and ask so many questions, is because we'll start thinking the upfront costs is what will scare us. We went for an exhibition, I think the African Housing Exhibition, and then they brought some cars, EV cars to it. And we were asking of the cost. We were asking how much it will cost for someone to maintain it. Wale, my mouth cannot talk. My mouth cannot talk. So I think the running cost is what will matter in the next 5-10 years. My eyes. I mean, Africa already understand this logic. We understand everything, but our reality do not fit all of these wonderful ideas. That is where the arguments will come from now.
Okay, I think the song that came to my mind. I cannot believe my eyes, but really, you couldn't believe your eyes and your ears when you were faced with reality. And I think we need to be faced with reality right now in having these discussions amongst ourselves on this continent. When it comes to this projection that by 2040, electric cars will be cheaper in Africa than vehicles that run on fossil fuel, I think that's a projection that can come true. And when I say can come true, is that when we look at China, they'll make it cheaper for us to buy at the end of the day. But when it comes to Africa, how do we begin to manage our own resources? Because there are lots of things involved. When you look at different aspects of the country, it's not like you're buying electric vehicles and it just miraculously gets to work better in the country. You've talked about the access to the spare parts in the country. Do we have the technological partnerships with the producers of these electric vehicles in our country? Do we have all the spare parts needed? Do we have all of the technicians needed? Because people that are working on vehicles that run on fossil fuel can't manage vehicles that work on electricity. So we need to look at that technology partnerships. We also need to look at the value chain of the production system when it comes to electric vehicle. We have the raw materials, we have the uranium used for the batteries, we have all of that being extracted or being exploited from Africa down to all these Western or the Chinese companies that are producing it. So can we begin to have that partnerships between them? Can you bring the production facility down to our country so that we can actually have our own citizens as well train with you and get those on-hand practical experience when they are producing on the continent? Then we look at the issue of epileptic power supply in the country and also for the continent, the wider African continent. There, just a few countries have been able to solve their own electricity issues, but it's also a problem that is also continuing for most African countries, Nigeria inclusive. We look at the megawatts that we're generating. We're not even generating enough to power our industries, let alone to then power the electric vehicles that we want to do. This is a process for green transition. We understand that it's a fantastic, beautiful projection. But when we look at all of these things, another problem that we need to look at is road access and connectivity. If you're trying to drive your electric vehicle from Lagos to Abuja and it breaks down somewhere along the road, how do you get your charging facility? Can you get a roadside mechanic that can help you to fix one thing or another? How smooth and accessible is also the road for you? If you run into potholes or whatever problems, or run into heavy traffic along the way, how can you be able to sustain the energy that you have in the vehicle that you can actually take you for the number of kilometers that you're going? And when we also look at the issue of policies from the federal government as well, how are we making sure that there's an enabling environment for all of these stakeholders to thrive in the country so that we can be able to transition from the use of fossil fuels when it comes to terms of mobility, cars, and moving to electric vehicles? So all of these stakeholders have to be have to have a cohesive approach towards achieving that for the 2040, because it's easier to say we can actually have it more affordable by 2040, but we're producing it here. Do we have all of the technological know-how to ensure that even though we're not producing it in adequate in large quantity here, but there's a technological know-how to repair things here to facilitate the running and the smooth operation of electric vehicles in the country? And also, what government interventions will also come to play when we look at state transport system, the federal government transport system as well? Can you phase out the use of fossil fuel? Can we have charging posts all around the city so that when somebody is going from one city, from one part of Abuja or from one part of Lagos or one part of Kano to another part of the same state, they can have the charging points where they can charge? Perhaps they're going to be installation of solar, just like it's been displayed earlier, where a car is being charged, actually connected to a solar panel that is providing the electricity for them to charge it. But we cannot afford that right now, and we cannot say the government will prioritize that for us in the next coming 2 to 3, 5 or 10 years, or even in the next 2 decades, as it's been less than 2 decades as it's been projected. So all of this has to come to play to be able to allow us to achieve this in 2040. But do we have the willpower to put that into action? You've talked about the issue of when we're talking about riders, the ride-hailing in drives and some other Bolt, Uber and all of that, and they talked about their security. How about the security of also riders that will be driving electric vehicles? Because recently China has just banned the electric vehicles so that you cannot actually hold the handle because accidents have happened. And we're importing all of this into the country. Are we looking at our own security issues as well? When you get into a place where, a fire truck or maybe a trailer carrying fuel has just decided to burst open because of an accident that has happened, and you're locked into your car, you can't actually open or you can't actually go out. Are we regulating the kind of EV vehicles that are coming into the country for safety issues for our drivers as well? Because there have been issues where the communication system with the rider and the vehicle actually is lost sometimes, where you don't have access to continue to manage it, self-driving autopilot or auto driving system that has been imputed into the system of that vehicle can actually go down when there's no internet connectivity and all of that? Are we looking at all of these issues when it comes to bringing the vehicles? It's not about just bringing them in. Can they actually work in this environment? Will they make lives better, or they will actually threaten safety and security in the country?
Very well said, Wale. But on a second thought, I was just looking at it from another angle now, saying, let's be honest with ourselves. Africa does not even, we do not need to reject EV if we look at it on a second thought, because we don't understand them. We cannot say we should reject them because we don't understand them. I mean, we move from one system. If we look at it very well, let's go back down history lane with the banking system. I mean, we did not wait to fizzle out all of those banks before we brought POS and all of this digital banking system. I mean, it was just brought about. People stumbled on it and we just got into it, and now people got used to it. And, we do not need to understand something before we begin to use them. Most of the time, in Africa, we reject these things because of interest rates, like I said before, because in many countries, when you look at it very well, car loans with let's say 25 to 40% interest can weigh you down. It can be a very huge burden, and even sometimes you see that all of these car loans interest rates are high, too high. But by the time you want to, if you look at how you pay for these cars when you get them, and then you look at the time you finish paying, you calculate everything, you notice that you must have bought this car twice. So I just feel where it becomes very uncomfortable, my unpopular opinion again, or my uncomfortable opinion, is that we should look at the, battery prices, first of all, are falling globally. And I'm even looking at the natural resources we have for all of these things. We have all the natural resources to, facilitate the production of some of these batteries, EV vehicles in particular. And we should understand, I mentioned earlier on that EV maintenance is not cheap. It is not cheap at all. But if our financing is not put in place, if our financing becomes or remains, should I say, hostile, our adoption with EV will be very slow. In short, it will even stall, in as much as we are pushing for it now. Not because EV do not work. Do not get me wrong. It's not because EV do not work. It's because the system is stacked against long-term ownership. So we should have that sense of, long-term ownership here. Because here's the irony, Wale. Petrol cars, first of all, they survive these conditions. Why? It's not because they are already, we were born with them. We were not born with them, but it's just because they have, should I say, they are already embedded in that informal system. If I should put it that way, second-hand imports, you get, they've been Africanized, Nigerianized, all the nice, we are seeing second-hand imports, we are having cash purchases, we are having, all of these roadside repairs, mechanics here and there. Anybody can be stationed anywhere, repairing cars and all of those things. And EVs do not yet have that. They have not been EV have not been institutionalized. So let me even use that word, that petrol cars have been institutionalized, but EV have not been institutionalized to enter that kind of ecosystem in African in African settings. So until all of these financing models are changed, all of these financing models are work on when it comes to leasing, all of these battery as a service. I think I read on the news one time that the battery as a service, there's a battery as a service cooperative ownership, something like that, and it was because regarding this EV idea. And let us just understand that if these things are not put in place, in essence, what I'm trying to say in essence, that if these things are not put in place, all of this talk about EV will remain economically should I say, a logic, and it will be inaccessible for people. It will be very inaccessible for people. We're looking at some countries saying, if we want to go back, they'll say South Africa is already adopting it. Mauritius is already going further with it, and I think which other country? I think Botswana, if I'm not mistaken, they're already going further with all of ahead with all of these things, and they are, more greener. They are more virtuous when it comes to talking about how we want to go green in Africa. But they are, if we look at them, they are ahead because of what? If we ask ourselves the question, they are ahead because of they have a structured system. They have put some certain structure. They have structured differently. And when we talk about structuring too, we have to talk about putting our reality in place. Even as African countries, we have to look at the realities of our countries and put these structures in place as it fits our reality. South Africa has a car manufacturing base. Nigeria was thinking of having a manufacturing base for EV cars. And we were laughing, we were saying, let's start with assembly first. And we are not saying let's start with assembly first because we do not believe in Nigeria's dream. We are saying, let's start the structured way. Start from this. Let's see how we grow. Then we crawl. Exactly. That's what we are trying to say. So South Africa have all of these things in place because they have good credit system. They have a good formal credit system. I've read of South Africa's credit facility. They have a good one. See how their farmers are thriving. I mean, they have a good one. If not because of this, their good credit facility system. If you look at the agricultural system, because of the fights with how do they call the whites? There's a name they call them, the Africans also. How do they call their names? And the black South Africans. I mean, the fight would have escalated. It would have gone beyond what it is because they have a structured system. So when we comparing some African countries to some other African countries, before we compare, let's look what they have put in place and look at how we can adopt it. Even if let's copy it. Look at Mauritius. Mauritius is ranking highest when it comes to tech and all of this, innovation and whatnot in Africa. It's because Mauritius have high fuel cost, but they have like a compact travel systems. So let's look at what they are doing right. Botswana that we are talking about, they have a stable system. They have a stable policy. They have lower import friction because they have a stable policy that guides that. So if we check to use them as example, let's think first. But then I think we have to go on a short break. And after this break, we'll have our analyst, our senior in-house analyst, come join us. Let's talk about this proper. Let's hear from an expert's points of view.
Number 1. Synthetic biology advances. Synthetic biology is pushing science into new territory. Using AI-guided gene editing, researchers are engineering organisms to produce biofuels, biodegradable plastics, and even synthetic meat. In 2023, Ginkgo Bioworks announced partnerships to design microbes that can manufacture sustainable chemicals at scale. Moderna and BioNTech are expanding mRNA technology beyond COVID vaccines to treat cancer and rare genetic diseases. The global synthetic biology market is expected to surpass $30 billion by 2030. By 2026, the line between biology and technology will blur even further, making synthetic biology one of the most transformative fields of the decade. So there you have it, 15 more technologies that, alongside the first 17 we covered, are set to define 2026. Together, they show how quickly innovation is moving beyond our screens and into every corner of our life, from the materials we use to the way we connect and even how we think. And if you missed part 1, make sure to check it out next. If you made it this far, let us know what you think in the comment section below. For more interesting topics, make sure you watch the recommended video that you see on the screen right now. Number 2, advanced neurotechnology beyond BCIs. Brain-computer interfaces grabbed headlines when Neuralink implanted its first chip in 2024. But neurotechnology is much broader. Researchers are testing non-invasive brain stimulation to treat depression and PTSD, while companies like Kernel are developing helmets that can monitor brain activity with unprecedented detail. Clinical trials are exploring personalized brain therapies for epilepsy and Alzheimer's. In 2023, the U.S. NIH launched its Brain Initiative 2.0, investing billions in advanced neurotech. By 2026, these innovations could expand from medical use into wellness and cognitive enhancement. Number 8. Self-healing materials. Materials that repair themselves aren't just science fiction anymore. Researchers at the University of Manchester developed a self-healing aerospace material that can autonomously patch small cracks in aircraft components. In 2023, LG Chem showcased self-healing coatings that restore scratches on car surfaces within minutes under heat. The potential extends to consumer electronics, where cracked phone screens may eventually fix themselves without a trip to the repair shop. Markets estimates the self-healing materials industry could grow to over $4 billion by 2027, with applications in automotive, aerospace, and infrastructure leading the way.
Welcome back. You're still watching Idea Morning Digest on Idea Television. Now we're joined by Idea TV senior analyst Chris Ejiofor, who joins us live in the studio to continue the conversation around electric vehicles, projection that it will be cost effective and even outrank the use of fossil fuel cars in the continent of Africa by 2040. So according to a research and a review by MIT Technology, by 2040, electric vehicles will be widely accepted and used in Africa more than fossil fuel vehicles. What do you make of that projection first?
That projection is very correct.
2040?
2040, yes. Because from analyst, I think you say MIT, and that's Massachusetts Institute of Technology in US, yes. I've gone into a lot of groundbreaking news and research right from that institute over the year. You understand? So what they projected for Africa is, I think it's very in the right direction, going by what is happening. A lot of countries have gone into what they call the EV vehicles, but in Africa here. So it's a good lead for those who decide to go into it. Now,
Interesting, but to jump on that train, because what we've established so far is that a lot of things has to be put in place when it comes to electricity in Africa, because EV vehicles are powered by electricity, and we understand the epileptic power supply that we have in Nigeria alone, not to talk about other African countries. When we look at the issue of technological partnership as well, we have, just like Cynthia has mentioned during our conversation, that there are a lot of roadside mechanics that are very familiar with the operations and the handling of fossil fuel vehicles in the country. And we're also talking about partnerships. How can we ensure that we're not only importing, but we're also producing in Africa here? So when we look at all of that, do you still believe that by 2040 Africa will be able to project itself to be able to afford not only affordability but sustainability and also the usage for ordinary Nigerians?
Okay, let me go into detail. Let me go to one of our neighboring countries back very close. Let me use Burkina Faso as a study case now. Burkina Faso is a country of less than 30 million. Burkina Faso has recently, there's a report on Burkina Faso for EV vehicles. Burkina Faso used what they call iTower 2000, a research institute in Burkina Faso. I've just launched their vehicle January 2025, their first EV vehicles. 100% indigenous production by Burkinabe engineers who came together to produce it. And their projection is by 2027, they will be hitting $11 billion mark trade on that vehicle. Understand? And so this is done by August 2000. It's just a suburbs town, a small town in Burkina Faso. That's where the research was done. And today they're into production of new vehicles. And for EV charge, then let me go back to what you're saying. You're talking about the issue of electricity, sustenance using electricity. Yes, if they can do that, I believe if Nigeria, with the will, we can equally do that. You understand? So if Burkina Faso projecting, their power projection is about 10 megawatts, and we are doing below, definitely we have to go back to the drawing board. Burkina Faso is doing about 10 megawatts of electricity with less than about 1/4 population of quarter population of the Nigerian population. If they can think in this direction, I think we should be able to do the same thing. You understand? So what it means that we have to go back to the drawing board to look at our energy supply in this country. Because for this issue of Burkina IOTA 2000, which is this vehicle produced by Burkina Faso, for every 30 minutes charge, the vehicle does 330 kilometers. For every 30 minutes charge. So which means that before every 330 kilometers, you have a charging point.
A charging point.
You understand? So and for you to do that, you must have a constant electricity for it to do that. So it shows that we have to go back to the drawing board in this country to know where we are heading to when it comes to technology.
It's more optimistic than
I don't want us to do a reality check here, because when we are saying, we keep saying EVs are cheaper and cheaper, they are cheaper over time.
Yes.
But they are cheaper for who? First of all, that's my question. Is it someone with stable income? Is it someone that barely survives on their monthly income? And if we want to check, we understand very well, like I mentioned earlier on, that fuel prices are painful because it's never stable. Today it's up there, next tomorrow it's down here, and all of this for many Africans. Let me not just be particular about Nigeria. And if we look at Africa very well, we can say that most Africans buy cars for less than, should I say, they buy second-hand cars. Let me not just say cars. They buy second-hand cars for, should I say, up to like 5 million naira, if I'm not mistaken.
Minimum.
And you must have gathered everything. So if we want to be realistic here, do EV realistically enter this price space in this in the next decade, in this time period we have talking about, from now to 2040? Are we still talking? If we are still in the same conversation about EV, are we still talking about the middle class, or we are talking about people in the corporate world?
Definitely, I think you're going to cut across this Euro strata. Yes, at that particular 2040 we're talking about. If we do the right thing.
People must
in
have
the sense that,
more.
No, apart from that, EV vehicles is cheaper to maintain in the reality of things. They're cheaper to maintain because in terms of a lot of, if you understand, if you know the technology behind vehicle, there are a lot of areas that's going to be done out with. They're not be part of the incorporated entire vehicle. You see, the engine block system, which is the major bulky part of ethical design in terms of a vehicle, is going out. The mechanical part of it is going out. You understand? Aside the four wheels. You understand? Even as at now, because at many vehicles now, and even Nigeria, can I show you, there are keke napep that uses more or less solar. They are there now. I think this man, Kuban, have done one in Lagos for my company. There's one in Lagos now. We use a panel at the top there. So EV vehicles in Nigeria, in terms of maintenance, is cheaper to maintain. Because when you talk about fossil fuel, it costs, fossil fuel is more or less, is put out of Western world are putting it behind technology now. The technology is going backward. That's what's called fuel and energy class in terms of fuel. Fossil fuel is no longer the in thing now. You know, aside that there are countries, bigger countries like the China economy and the America still rely more on that, despite they having the EV vehicles. You know, so when it talks about maintenance, because most of these fossil fuel related vehicles always have their own related problem when it comes to maintenance. But for EV vehicles, only what you needed there more or less is about 10% of the mechanical side and the electrical side. And the electrical side, understand. So issue of you going to mechanics to go and do repair and do access, more or less is off the line.
Okay, but now I'm more interested in how this will reverberate around Africa's economic space. When we look at 2040, we're projecting that we'll sell more cars, electric vehicle cars, and that's what will that lead to is that there will be less consumption of fossil fuel on the continent of Africa, because that's mostly where our consumption goes into. And for Nigeria, there's a fossil fuel production producing nation, and that's where we get bulk of our own revenue from as a nation. Is that a threat to our own national income for the country?
Yes.
And what if it's a threat that you've agreed with, what then should we do in the next 10, 15 years to be able to understand that we would not be hit hard on the face when this reality actually comes to pass. Because the transition to green technology, if Nigeria continues to say we're not going forward or we're not implementing the things that needs to be done, other African countries, like we've seen, are going to continue to move forward and lead the trade. And we're going to be left behind by the trade. And if we say we want to continue to sell, the time of the oil boom that we have the excess crude accounts, I'm not sure we have something like that anymore. There's no excess crude account to put excess crude. Now we're looking at saying, okay, if the one that we've sold, how can we use it for the country? It's not even enough. Let's go and borrow more. So how can we ensure that Nigeria is not affected when this phase is being implemented?
The only way out is to diversify our economy, which I think they should have started in the last 10 years. When we are talking about Vision 20, when today now we are gone past Vision 20. Now talking about Vision 30. So this we have to examine. So we have to start walking the talk now. That's the truth about it, you understand? Because major economies today in the world are not relying, and they don't rely on fossil fuel. For example, Japan. Yes, that's true.
Just to reiterate, even for Saudi Arabia now, and the UAE and the Gulf countries in general, they're redirecting their focus into tourism, into sustainable living, and they're investing their money where it really matters. But for Nigeria, where do you think we can actually invest our money or invest our resources that we have now, so that we're not going to be left behind in the next 20, 30 years when this transition
if we can't go
happen?
The technological way, let us go the intensive agricultural way. Yes, let us be able to feed ourselves, export enough food outside the country, then make the money. Because most of these countries are saying, so Israel doesn't have much anything about oil. You understand? But they live on more or less what you call they live mostly on technology.
Yes.
Technology is what is giving Israel. The same thing Japan. Japan doesn't have any single natural resources today, but they're one of the leading economy of the world today. So we can begin to diversify and look inwards and see what we can do outside oil. Outside oil, because they said that the other countries are moving and the African be moving. Burkina Faso is more or less under a military regime now. So if they can do that this fit, it tells that it's not issue about democracy or whatever it is. That's what I'm telling you.
That's what I want to say. Talking about agriculture, when you look at the United States, you look at China, you look at even Switzerland, which is a country industrial scale farming. You can't just have two farmers in one community or hundreds of farmers in one community that just are farming on 2 plots of land. We can't be able to put our resources together for exports in that extent, because there's no cohesive administrative process that's in ensuring that all of the resources that were being that's being produced through our agricultural industry are actually suitable for export. There was a time when our yam was refused by the European Union. All of our maize are not suitable for export. So how can we ensure that, because we continue to sign technology partnerships, we continue to sign MOUs and all of that, and nothing is being done, we're going to be left behind.
Yes, but we should be led by standards, you understand? At times you see they tell us, you are importing a fake system, the country are fake machinery. We have Standard Organization of Nigeria. If Standard Organization of Nigeria, yes, what are they doing? You understand? So you must regulate whatever you export. Those things must be. Today, America is the problem. The economic war between China and America is based on the fact that China has what they call low productivity. Yes, China can give you about 200 men with a less cost because of their population. They export their own technology outside the country with minimal cost. So America will give them the standard. Look here, produce cheap for us, but these are the standard. It must go below it. You understand? But because it's cheaper there in the China to produce than in the US. You understand? So those are the tricks they use most of these countries. So we can go back to the drawing board and say these are standards. Whether we are exporting agri product or whatever, it must meet social standard for it to meet up whatever is going to go outside the country. But today, not enough. Everybody just bring on what you want from the agri sectors and whatever and say, we want to export. We rejected, just like you said, by those who know that there's a standard for everything we are coming to it. For example, European market is 70%. 70% of European market, the EU market, is what goes into US. 70% is not going to US. That's why you see when the issue of Greenland started, they were threatening, NATO was threatening American business because America cannot work without EU. Understand? All members of the EU make up what we have 70% of what American interest in terms of agri production of technical production. And the American mentioned that there are certain things they push out to the European Union. They say Czechoslovakia, you want to give us this standard. You understand? France, this want to give us standards. So they understand. So these standards remain the ultimate. When it comes to that, this is what you are expecting. The standard you are expecting for a particular technology. So we should begin to work with those standards and they want to export. You understand? So not the issue of now wanting to meet up with you, meet up within basic minimum standards.
Yeah. And indeed, how can we also participate in that value chain as well? We shouldn't be a repository for natural resources alone. How can we contribute to building those standards ourselves, even locally, and export as well? But before Cynthia comes with her question, I want to talk about the decentralization of the system in Nigeria. We have the federal government, the state, and the local government as well. When we're talking about this vision 2040, this projection for 2040, how can state government also put in policies or put in incentives to be able, because when we look at even the road network in Nigeria, there's what is called the federal road, and then there's the state road. So everyone has their part. Has a part to take, to partake in projecting us forward in achieving this goal. So what do you think state governments or even local governments can do, aside from what federal government has to do in terms of providing the funding, allocation, and the rest?
You see, I think the job of federal government is to lay the policies for states to operate, which I believe they are doing, even though it's not enough. And a state government, like I remember Edo State went out sometime, it was about 4 months ago, to sign an MOU with some Paris companies and there's some part of other groups. When I come back with people who are saying, what do you want to sign for? About what billions? Let us see what you have signed. You understand? So it tells you that the federal government can regulate the state minimum standard when it comes to going to sign MOU outside the country. Not just going to borrow, because many of them borrow. And federal government should teach them to go and borrow. At the end of the day, it becomes a problem. At the end of the day. So it all matters, it depends on the policies. Federal government must put the enabling policies for the state to operate. When it comes to that, state can go and negotiate or sign an MOU with the country, but it must be what interest, what benefits the country and in the long run. It's not the issue of going and sign because of what you want to gain. But it must be something that eventually benefit the country, the entire country. That should be the basics of going to sign any MOU outside the country. But then they should be given a free hand, because there are some state governors who have the mindset of growing their own state. In a federal structure, every state must compete. That's how it's supposed to be. Every state must compete, and therefore you give them that leverage to go and exercise that idea that we want to bring the best to social state. And not question of beginning a problem, but it must be something that is within a viable standard. Yeah.
We said so much, but I want us to. I know everybody will say climate advocate, but yes, we have to talk about the climate, because if we talk about the climate today, we're talking about our future. So I'm just looking at the risk for Africa. First of all, 2040, if we look at it, it feels like it's a long time. But if we sit down and think very well and look at the road,
years away.
If we look at it very well and say, 2040 is far away, but then we see most of the cars that are being driven today, they have been bought 10 years,
15 years back.
15 years, and they're still on the road today. So I'm looking at the future. Some of the cars that will be bought in today and in the next 5 years will still be driven until 2040 and even after 2040. So I want us to look at the environmental costs here. I know you're an engineer, sir, but then even as an engineer, I know climate is everybody's business. So as we are creating, we need to be thinking about the climate. We need to be thinking about environmental the environmental costs that lies in with all of these EV talks and whatnot. I think first of all, is there a risk that African countries will become a dumping ground for these EVs, just like most of these fuel
vehicles,
cars
yes.
that were brought into the country. I mean, most of the cars that are driven in Africa, we cannot like second-hand cars. So we don't want a situation. I know that most African countries are already working. I don't know how many, but not most. But I know Nigeria is already looking towards that part. Mauritius mentioned, you know, South Africa, Botswana already on that part. But we have a lot of African countries in this continent, 54 if I'm not mistaken. And that's a lot. 54 is still a lot.
So much.
So, and we have numbers, we have a growing population. So I'm looking at the environmental cost of this. What is the plan for recycling all of these batteries that are being used for these EVs later? Because we don't want a situation. I know Nigeria was talking about taking away end-of-life vehicles on the road, and let's see how we can start recycling them. But what do you think from your own perspective? What do you think? How do you think we can, you know, plan to recycle all of these batteries so they don't become something we just dump? We're trying to solve one environmental problem, then at the end of the day, another climate issue is, you know, arising from it.
But if even the conventional battery we are using now, which is either the dry cell or the liquid type vehicles, you understand, they are still recycling. As at now, in Lagos, there are more or less people who go about. They even put it on social media. You see them say, if you have used contained battery, bring it there. So they are exporting those batteries to China as at now. This container side. So there's never a time that we get those batteries becoming nuisance to the system. You understand? The only thing is that even the so-called EV vehicle, all they still use electric batteries, stored batteries. You understand? So it never get time. But the point is that now, like we're talking about the end of use vehicles, that is it's as a country we should have a way of more or less recycling these vehicles, the old vehicles at the same time, old battery systems along the same time. So they are already existing. I think Lagos State have gotten what they call the caution factory now. You understand? Because those vehicles, you understand, and recycle it and use it, because the only first thing that you must have technology to reproduce. You can't just crush and think and send it to Europe again. You know, and bring it back as a ready-made. You understand? So as you are crushing, you must have technology for you to. Like when I talk about, I continue to mention Burkina Faso. Burkina Faso now, as of now, this EV vehicle, they are crushing at the same time manufacturing to produce EV vehicles now. As at now, you understand? So why can't we do the same? As well, if we claim to be the giant or whatever in terms of population, we should be able to do the population. No, we should be doing the same thing. You understand? So machinery to crush vehicle, I think our crush vehicle or crush battery system should be in place. I think it's already in place now. So for me, that is no problem. But the issue of information is an issue like environment. Environment is basically like, when I was listening to the guy who was mentioning about the chief engineer who handled this production of vehicles in Burkina Faso, he was talking about the ecosystem in Burkina Faso. They are interested in to reducing the carbon emission in our sun, which if they are thinking like Europe, I think we should be doing the same thing. We should be doing the same thing. That's the truth. With our population and everything and our land mass, we should be doing the same thing.
I think we'll hold on to that. So
the verdict now. Do you still believe that 2040 Africa will have more electric vehicles?
Sure, very sure. I believe that.
Okay, that's quite optimistic. Thank you so much, Engineer Chris, for that wonderful conversation. It's been an interesting conversation so far with our senior analyst at Idea Television. We'll go on a short break. When we come back, we'll go to the next segment, which is What's Trending. Stay with us.
Number 6, 6G networks and beyond. 5G is still rolling out worldwide, but work on 6G is already in motion. South Korea, Japan, and Finland are leading trials, with commercial deployment expected around 2030. 6G aims to use terahertz frequencies to deliver speeds up to 100 times faster than 5G and latency as low as 100 microseconds. That's fast enough to support real-time holograms, autonomous fleets, and massive IoT ecosystems. The ITU has begun setting 6G standards, while companies like Nokia and Samsung are actively developing hardware. By 2026, early 6G pilots will give us a glimpse of the post-5G world.
Welcome back. You're still on Idea Morning Digest. This is What's Trending. ASO Rock to disconnect from national grid in March. And later on, Reno Moker defends ambassador role despite past comments against Tinubu. Lastly, Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan walks out after clash with committee chair. Now, the details of what's trending on social media across platforms yesterday. The Aso Rock Presidential Villa is expected to fully disconnect from the national electricity grid by March 2026, following the completion of its solar power project, the State House Permanent Secretary Temitokpe Fashedemi has disclosed. Fashedemi made the revelation on Wednesday while defending the State House 2026 budget before the Senate Committee on Special Duties at the National Assembly Complex in Abuja. He told the committee, chaired by Senator Kakalawan, that the solar installations was completed towards the end of 2025 and had been undergoing testing since December. Now let's look at the chain of events. In 2023 election campaign, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, during his inauguration, said that if he doesn't provide adequate electricity for Nigerians, then they shouldn't vote for him for the 2026 election. Then he also made mention in 2023 during his own inauguration that that fuel subsidy in Nigeria is gone, while also in 2025 the State House made 10 billion naira budget was allocated to the installation of solar panels at the State House in Abuja, and in 2026 budget 7 billion naira has also been earmarked for that facility in the State House. Now, I think this is a success for the Nigerian State House, that they've been fully able to successfully take away the grid facility, to disconnect themselves from the grid facility, and they've transitioned to green energy that you're a champion for. So they've transitioned. This is a wonderful government. I think they deserve a round of applause. But it's a wonderful development that has continued to leave Nigerians, as we've mentioned there, in penury, because most Nigerians cannot afford this 10 billion, 7 billion naira that the federal government has allocated to ensure that they have had adequate access to an uninterrupted power supply for them. But we look at the Nigerian power system, and we see the epileptic power supply that we get. Every now and then the national grid is collapsing, and someone actually said on social media, is this national grid actually real? Or is just somebody online that is strolling on that the national grid has collapsed every now and then, because it doesn't seem to be real. Well, every day it's faulty. When every single market day, people say every Eke market day, it's always a fall of the national grid. But it raises an important question, I mean, really, that if the federal government of Nigeria cannot have that confidence in the electricity supply of the country, what more of ordinary Nigerians? What can we do? And if you can continue to fatten your own pockets and also make facilities that are conducive for to run a system or to run a State House that is good for you, what then should Nigerians do when they're facing, you remove the fuel subsidy from the country, they're facing skyrocketed high prices for petrol, which is the go-to source for most Nigerians when it comes to powering their generator to power their own homes and businesses. So it continues to, the conversation is one that we need to look at ourselves holistically and look at the federal government and look at what they're saying, that they're detaching themselves from that grid. Exactly. So perhaps they won't even understand what it feels like for when most Nigerians are complaining, when you're not even experiencing what I'm experiencing. Just like people would say that when some senators in some constituency win election, they never go back there, or they leave the community and stay in Abuja, or live within the metropolis, and they never experience what the people in their own local is experiencing and the challenges they are facing. So when Nigeria, the federal government and the state house has removed themselves from the national grid, what do we have to say for ordinary Nigerians? You are the climate champion. You are the climate advocate.
I'm not even
kudos to them for that success.
Kudos to them for the success. Wow, this kudos is going to come not with our full chest, because I'm looking at it and I'm asking myself, is this a reform or is it a retreat? Because this it's more like a retreat for me. And this is a government that is pushing for it's supporting the greener future and supporting the greener economy, and yet it's we are talking about decentralization, and decentralization is only working in where power lies and is not meeting every corner of the world, is not shifting at scale. Then there is a problem, because now I don't have a problem with solar, and I'll never have a problem with solar. And anytime I talk about climate, anytime I advocate for climate, anytime I talk about climate mitigation, how we can, curb climate issues, I'm always talking about reality first. I'm always talking about how we can, think of our immediate problem and how we can solve them first. It's not it's not just big glamorous English I'm talking about. Go green, do this, use solar, use that. No. How are we going to provide solar at scale for people? This is a government, this is a government that, in fact, let me even start with saying, like I said before, solar is not the problem here. I will never have a problem with solar. Like they say, solar is the future. Yeah, and I can agree with that. To an extent, solar is the future, and that doesn't mean that we are going to completely, I'm not in line with those school of thought or those group of people that say we are completely going to fizzle out fossil fuel. What works for you works for you. I think we have to just find, I always talk about balance. I think we just have to find the balance, but not to shift completely from what I'm trying to say is that, like I said before, solar is the future, like everybody's doing, especially in a country with like Nigeria that has much sunlight. Solar is the future for us if we think of it properly, if we think of how to utilize it well. The uncomfortable part, Wale, is the contrast here. Because this is a country that the leaders told the citizens to how did they even say, to endure fuel subsidy, that we should we have been renewing our hope for how many years now, that we should continue renewing our hope, that good things takes time, and they told us to endure fuel subsidy removal in the name of long-term reform. And here we are, many households. Nigerians, how do they say Nigerians are resilient people. Nigerians sucked it all in, and they were like, okay, households went into deep energy poverty, Wale. A lot of businesses failed. A lot of businesses are no longer functioning because they cannot afford fuel prices. Fuel prices went up, and it's going up every now and then. Generators became a luxury, because it almost seems like if you cannot buy fuel, you cannot even use a generator again. So, in the middle of all of these things, Wale, in the middle of all of these things, our country's, the State House quietly went and insulated itself with a
they made it public.
They made it public. They did it before they came out and did you know when they protested it? Did you know when they came to install it?
They won't tell us.
We didn't know that. So they quietly went, protested it, and then they came by a multi-billion naira alternative power plan. You insulated yourself in the midst of all of this problem that you have put the citizens in. So I'm just looking at all of these things for Nigeria, and sometimes I'm sorry for us, sometimes I'm embarrassed, sometimes I don't know what this is for us at this point in time. But we should understand that if this government should understand that if we want to push something like this, we should push it at scale. If you can, I mean, this is a very loud admission, first of all, that there is a fundamental problem in Nigeria's system. Because if our State House cannot rely on electricity, on the national grid, then what can you say about the citizens? Should we be the ones that will not rely on? Is it because Nigerians have been resilient so much that somehow some houses have been owning solar, owning this, owning that? But how many people can afford solar? So when we think, if we see that, okay, this admission, like I said before, it's in two ways for me, both the positive and the negative. And the positive aspect of it is that, okay, we have come to the realization, or we have realized before, but we have accepted that national grid is no longer working for us that way. When it comes on, let it come on, but we have solar there to back it up for us. Then this is what we should do. We should say, okay, why don't we provide this in large scale
In
for
large scale,
everybody.
for everybody.
So that is the positive side of this admission. It's the positive side of it. But the negative side of it is that we overlook everybody. We overlook the problems. The State House overlooked the problems of Nigerians. And you know that Nigerians, millions of houses in Nigeria rather, are dependent on this national grid. And then you left them. No, it just tells us that something fundamental is broken, Wale. It just tells us that
something fundamental is broken. I think we can end that one there. But moving on to our next story, Ambassador Designate Reno Omokri has appeared in a viral video and an interview, eating his own words of vowing never to work with President Bola Ahmed Tinubu because it is not in his DNA. Omokri was a fierce critic of Tinubu, but said his opposition about the president has changed, and says his acceptance of the position was due to his commitment to Nigeria, despite formerly being a fierce critic of President Bola Tinubu. The former presidential aide under ex-president Goodluck Jonathan is reported to have said he won't work with the Tinubu government, but when asked why he accepted the ambassadorial appointment from the Senate admission, Omokri said, "That's not what I said. The question you asked me was that if Tinubu asked me to work with him, would I accept? I said no, it's not in my DNA." He further stated that when I met with the administration's officers, I said I can't take certain positions because of certain things that I said earlier. However, I never said I cannot work for Nigeria. As an ambassador, I'm going to work for Nigeria. I will be an ambassador of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, he said on the Current Affairs show. As we saw in the video there, where he during the last election, he was seen protesting in the UK when President Tinubu appeared at the Chatham House conversation, the speech where they had a dialogue with electorates and some other stakeholders in the UK. So we've seen this man pontificate many times, go from one, it was part of the exit of Goodluck Jonathan, is a fierce supporter of Atiku. Now there was a time he was praising Peter Obi as well as one of unique Nigerian that is different from all the other politicians, and vowed that he will never work with this government because it's not in his DNA to work with Bola Ahmed Tinubu. Now he has accepted the ambassadorial position, as we see them shaking hands there right on the TV. So how he has then taken back his own words after his appointment. We've been seeing him wear his dashiki up and down and with his usual cap with the President Tinubu's insignia, that we've seen him accept it. But some other people will say, man must chop. Something must come to the table. If you have to support Atiku when he's there, you support Atiku. If you have to support Obi when he's there, you support Obi. If you have to support President Tinubu now that he's there, and it gives you an opportunity to earn a living and become an ambassador for Nigeria, you cannot support it, because as a man you have to provide for your family. I mean, that's an argument, but another aspect to look at it is the issue of morality. If you're not a man of your words, if today and tomorrow your words can change. There was a critic that mentioned something online. He said, when you want to know Reno Omokri is lying, just look at his mouth. You see that it is moving. And now we see that his mouth is it's not my words, it's the words of who said it is moving. Now we can see that his mouth is moving again, because he said clearly that I cannot work with an administration. It's just saying that, oh, I would never drink water. And then you see the person in the next minute drinking water. So I don't. It's not my mouth that is. It's not me that is drinking the water. It's my stomach that is drinking it through my mouth. That is what you are exactly saying at the end of the day. But it's interesting how we see that political alliances shift as different political power comes to play. That people cannot continue to stay with one person for long. The son of the late President Muhammadu Buhari mentioned something. I think it was a piece that he authored on the newspaper, when he said his phones no longer ring. When his father was president, he received thousands of calls in a day. When he left the office, he reduced to 100. And when he died, he feels like it's just a couple of people that reach out to him when they need a business associates and friends and family. So we've seen that when you are in power, people come up to you because of the things that they can get from you, and they criticize you when they're in the opposition. But when you come into power, the alliances change. people will always suck up to you because of what they can get. But Reno Moku is now the ambassador designate. We're looking forward to his primary assignment and representing Nigeria wherever he is deployed.
I think you've said very much, Adewale, because I think this issue is more of how the Nigerian politics works, about how flexible, the flexibility of convention.
If I can
go ahead.
Interrupt you, I don't think this is about Nigerian politics alone. Look at the president of the United States, President Trump. We've seen that his rhetorics, his position has emboldened a lot of people. There are people who were in the opposition before. Has somebody like Tulsi Gabbard. She was now the national. I've forgotten what her position is, but she wasn't a Democrat before. Now she's become a Republican. Supported this man, and when she's been offered a position, she took it. So it's not in Nigeria alone that you see people suck up to you, or they feel emboldened by your own rhetoric, and they want to pontificate about things and gravitate towards you. I think it's just about power play generally in the world.
And I also feel it's just about the flexibility of conviction. We know Reno rather is very, articulate. He's very media savvy. I read his posts and his tweets every now and then, and he's very aware about the online space. He's very aware of how to use words. So he's not somebody that will say he just uses words loosely. He loses it. He ties it up again. So he's always there to, defend himself how he wants to. And I feel like his defense that he's working for Nigeria, not for Tinubu, is legally and politically correct. If we look at it very well, we'll see that.
You thought about that before you said it.
Yes, it is. Like if you look at it, yes, he must have given it. He's not a deep thought. I don't want to say. There's something I want to say, but I'll just hold that. But I feel like he must have given it a deep thought. That's why I say he's somebody that he uses words loosely, and it comes again. He ties it like he can make sense and not make sense at the same time. So I just feel like his defense is legally correct. Like I said before. It is politically correct. It is even politically convenient because he is a politician, whether you like it or not. Right now, even if he comes out to say, I'm not a politician, sometimes you work with these politicians. So somehow, you are indirectly a politician. So this kind of statement is politically convenient too, because ambassadors serve the, why I say it is correct, because ambassadors serve the states. They serve the, the country, the nation, not the president. So if he comes out and say, I'm not serving the country, I think that part is very true. It's very correct. He's allowed to say that, and it's okay by me, and I think it should be okay by all, because I know the public will see it that way, because public trust doesn't work on technicalities. It is more like it works on memory. What we remember. You have said this before. Come here, especially Nigerian media space can be very, very funny. Yeah, like you said this before. Come here, and they hold you by your words and tie you back to it. They will refer you back to something you've said and even forgotten that you ever wrote or heard that kind of thing. So I feel like people remember the certainty with which once somebody spoke, and that is what they are doing with Reno's case here. They are saying, you said this thing, you have done this thing, and I do not hold people by what they are saying too. We are allowed to think the way we want to think. Our opinions are allowed to fly, because I feel like criticism is normal. So I'm looking at people's point of view from the critical, aspect, that criticism is normal. So it's normal for people to say, okay, he said this and he didn't say this. Or when you say something is not in your DNA, I'm looking at that. You are not leaving room for interpretation.
His DNA has changed.
You are not leaving any room for interpretation, because you put it out there on social media. And social media, there's something they say about social media, that it never forgets. It never forgets. So the discomfort Nigerians feel is it's not hypocrisy. It's not hypocrisy. It's not hypocritical at all. It's not hypocritical at all. It's on, should I say, it's on credibility. And Nigerians are tired of holding people, like calling people to be accountable for their words, their decisions, and all of those things. So it's just, I think it's credibility. I think it's safe for me to say it's credibility fatigue at this point in time for the public. And let's be fair, Nigerian. Let me even look at the brighter side of all of these things. Let's leave Reno, let's leave everything out of it. Let's talk about his new position, because at the end of the day, we want to see good work. We don't want to see, we don't give it up. I think we don't care about, you know, ideology, you know. We cannot reward good work with all of these ideologies. We want to see good work put into action. We want to see you know, him work. We don't want to come out and see Reno coming out to, you know, explain himself, what he quote or what he did not quote. We want to see if he is ready. If he wants to keep contradicting himself, let him do it. Sometimes I don't joke with intelligent people like him. I think it's okay for me to say he's an intelligent person because okay. I just want to see his role produce measurable, you know, goals. Let people, because the diplomatic terrain do not value all of these things we are talking about, especially Nigerians living abroad. They are going through a lot of things and they need some form of security or the other. We are battling security issues in the country. The kind of security people living abroad need outside the country is on another level. They need to see that, you know, there's trade links. They need to see all of those soft power play. They need to see diaspora protection in one way or the other. So that is where we want to see his works come in for, you know.
Indeed, that's where we want to see his work comes in, and I think he's going to do well. I'm hoping he will do well representing Nigeria wherever he is deployed or posted to serve as an ambassador. But one thing that you mentioned about how he is not working for Tinubu, he's working for Nigeria. And that's a question that most people have said, that political appointees, be it ministers or the governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria or whatever appointment that you've been given, those are responsibilities that require you to work for the benefit of Nigerians and not for the benefit of the political leader that has brought you into power. For instance, the federal government and the president appoints judges, but the judges are supposed to be independent. They're supposed to carry out their own responsibility, devoid of any influence from the presidents themselves. But can we actually see that Nigeria is a place where any political appointee, someone as low as, I mean, as high and as low on the cadre like an ambassador, would not be susceptible to the influence of the political institutions that brought them into power? So I think that remains to be seen, and how they are going to make that work. But moving on to our last, just to read it, tensions flare in Senate as Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan walks out after clash with committee chair in Abuja, February 12, 2026. We see that Senator Natasha had an altercation when they were having Senate Committee on Steel Development session and the budget allocation for the ministry. The walkout followed heated arguments with Chairman Senator Patrick Ndu Bueze, who struck the gavel to end questioning of the minister. And after Natasha left, requiring the senator not to hit the gavel, that this is actually a state where he's very particular to her. And the discussion about the Ajaokuta, she wanted to raise her up and ask many questions, but we just want to see that there's no chaos at the National Assembly. We don't want to see the suspension of Natasha or any other person out of insubordination, because we want you guys to do well. We want you to represent Nigeria well and not to create chaos. Do you have anything to add to that before we...
I just think what this really exposes is how fragile our legislative oversight becomes when, you know, personalities overshadow processes. And talking of the Ajaokuta, it's too important for ego clashes at this point in time. It's something we are looking at, how to revitalize it, revive it, not even revitalize, revive it, you know, on a national scale, you know, not to be talking of who should carry it on their heads more than the other person. And I think it's been a national promise for decades, the Ajaokuta state. So when discussions about it dissolve into all of these workouts and all of these troubles and all of these writers are like, what is this? This is not what we need at this point in time, because Nigeria will lose a lot of confidence in our leaders. I mean, we have lost that trust and confidence and that seriousness. And if we want that to stay as is, let's do well in our governance space. But I think that's the much we can take for this, because our time is fast.
It's fast spent. So let's look at the weather report before we call it today.
Okay, the conversation doesn't end here because, as we always say, the future of Africa is in the hands of Africans. So join us, with the conversation. Send your opinions, send your ideas, send your comments to us about what we've discussed today. We want to hear from you. Send it to our social media platforms at Idea Television, and of course via email at Idea TV Limited. And you can also, follow up with this episode in case you missed it, or you did not start with us from the beginning, or you missed other episodes. You can catch all of the replay on YouTube and Limex at Idea TV. I think this is where we draw the curtains for today. My name is Cynthia Bassi, and I have been with
Adewale Olashupo.
Okay, and this is where we say bye for now.